Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now, here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the 7th installment of the Apollo Case Study Series. I'm joined, as always, in this series by Dr. Jim Moore, and this is brought to you by the good folks at Apollo Behavior. So, Jim, thanks for joining me again. And you've brought with you a cast of characters here, and I'm looking forward to yet another lively discussion. So I'm going to let you actually let you do all the work today. I'm going to let you do the hosting duties. I'm going to let you ask the questions. I'm going to let you introduce people. So why don't you take it away from here? And I look forward to just kind of sitting back and sipping on my sparkling water as we proceed through this really fascinating conversation. I'll, of course, jump in here and there because I can't help myself. But other than that, take it away, Jim.
All right. Thanks, Matt. We're so excited to be back. Took a little holiday break, and now we're here to really talk about an important subject to practitioners, which is RBT onboarding and RBT training. As many of your listeners probably know, it's so vital to have strong training for RBTs. They spend the most time with clients. But it also can be a huge expense and a huge investment of resources. So as with everything that we've talked about on our case study series, we're trying to balance both effectiveness and efficiency. And so I thought, who better to talk about our training program than some of the folks that help make it great. And we continue to try and become better and better and better. So it's my pleasure to welcome Rachel, Christina, and Emily to the podcast today. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves and just tell us a little bit about yourself, what your role is here at Apollo, and anything else you think might be fun for the listeners. So Rachel, let's start with you.
Yeah, okay. So my name is Rachel. I was a BCBA at Apollo case supervisor, but I've recently transitioned into the role that we call Director of Clinical Excellence. And so what that means is I oversee all training of clinical staff, and I also oversee quality assurance. So ensuring that our clinical outcomes are what we expect them to be, and then providing training to help us get there. So in my role, I oversee RBT training as well, which is super cool because that was kind of my passion.
Christina, how about you go next?
Awesome. Hello, my name's Christina. I've been with Apollo for about 2 years. I was originally a lead RBT and recently got into the RBT Training Coordinator position. I've always had a passion for training, so I deal with mostly training our new hires to become excellent and amazing technicians here at Apollo. And I'm also in charge of our lead RBTs and making sure they train all of our new hires up to our Apollo standard.
All right. And Christina is also in graduate school training to become a BCBA. Do you want to give a shout out to your training program?
Sure. I'm currently a graduate over at Capella University. So I'm training to be a BCBA, and it's been super fun because here at Apollo, you also get experience with studying, learning everything that I do in class. I also get hands-on experience. And I feel like this training coordinate position really helps to build those leadership skills and helps me with everything that I plan to do in the future.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. And last but definitely not least, Emily.
My name's Emily Jackson. I'm a lead RBT here at Apollo. I originally started as a special education teacher. I taught kindergarten through 2nd grade, self-contained, and wandered my way into ABA. I've been here ever since. Got my RBT, moved up into a lead. This week, I just started my graduate program at the University of Kansas. Woohoo, Rock Chalk! So that's really exciting. I love what I do. I love getting to learn from these 3 people that are here, and I'm super passionate about where the field of ABA is going. So,
thanks, Emily, and I'm sure our colleagues at Kansas will appreciate you representing with your shirt today. So, just to jump right into it, my original vision for our RBT training was a mixture of many effective teaching methodologies in ABA, and also kind of a synthesis of training and coaching. Some folks make some distinctions between the two, but really it's about how do we help an RBT feel as competent as possible on day one, realizing that we can't get them to the level of our lead RBTs just after an onboarding, but really setting them up to continue to see their skill set grow. So we have components of Keller's personalized system of instruction with some readings and mastery learning along the way. Of course, we have our 40-hour training that we actually, on one of our agendas this year, is to revise that. And then the part of our training that our trainees usually say is most beneficial, which is shadow training using BST that our lead technicians at each location oversee. So, Rachel, why don't you talk just a little bit more in depth, because I'm sure there's a lot of context that I've missed there, and talk a little bit about where we are now and where we kind of hope to go in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in my role, I kind of am overseeing our RBT training. I work very closely with Christina, and she kind of handles the day-to-day management, and I'm there to assist her and kind of ensure that our trainees are coming out. So like Dr. Moore said, we're not expecting them to come out like our people who have been RBTs for 2 years, but we do want to get them to a level of competence and confidence to ensure that, that first day they're treating by themselves after they pass the RBT exam, they're not feeling like, oh my goodness, what have I gotten myself into? And so I would say right now, we're using a 40-hour training course. And like Dr. Moore said, our vision is to create one specific to Apollo, which is what I'm working on developing right now. One thing I think that makes Apollo's training process a little unique is something that we're rolling out right now, which is the certified trainer. And so up until this point, all of our lead RBTs, they go through standards to become leads. And now we're opening it up to more people to be able to go through a more extensive training process in BST in order to provide the best quality outcomes. Because like Dr. Moore said, when we talk to our trainees, after they pass their exam and we ask them, what was the most helpful for you? It's that hands-on experience. We all know that sitting through a 40-hour course, can be really dry. And, I was an RBT right when people started requiring people to become RBTs. And my 40-hour training course was really boring, if I'm just being straight up. And it took me a lot to get through it. And then I didn't feel prepared when I started treating clients. I was in home. I was by myself. There was no clinic setting. And so, my vision for our program is that every single one of our new trainees, when they pass their exam, they feel like they've gotten the experience, the hands-on experience to be able to treat a client that first day.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel. And kind of following up on that, Christina, what are some things, Rachel talked about one thing with our certified trainer program that is unique, and I know other agencies might have something similar. What are some other things about our methodology that you think is different from other training methods out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big one is that Apollo really follows through with the tell, show, and do. So for all trainees, we tell them like an instruction, what the definition is, we show them. So kind of like modeling, this is what we expect, and then do. They have a chance to actually get that hands-on experience that I think a lot of companies are like, let me just do the tell and show, and they're missing on the actual do. And I know I've worked at many different companies. I've done many training roles in those. And so far, Apollo has the best method because a lot of the times during my training opportunities, I was just on the sideline watching. And so I didn't actually get that hands-on experience where someone actually be like, hey, you did this step. It might not be the best step, but I actually had somebody there to help me walk through the process rather than, like day one was when I was serving, I'd literally walk up to the table and be like, hello, I'm Christina. I don't know how to take your order, but let's walk through it together was kind of how all I was left through. So I really appreciate that even in my role, I have somebody that I have looked forward to and be like, okay, can you show me how to do X, Y, and Z, and then go from there. So I think Apollo really does something different with just following those 3 simple steps of tell, show, and do.
Yeah, and the importance is, as we know, is the more immediate the feedback, the better the performance and the faster the acquisition. So it's just so important. Emily, from your perspective, we have a lot of employees that have, maybe they know someone with autism, but they haven't necessarily heard of applied behavior analysis. How do you help those people, or how does our methods help those people become both competent and confident to not only pass the RBT exam the first time, but also to go into those sessions and really help us transform the lives of our clients?
I think our training structure is established in a way where it really allows the lead RBT that's administering the training to build a relationship with this trainee and really teach them that you're not just an RBT here, you're part of our team. And we want you to succeed. We want you to grasp these concepts. And no matter what it takes, we're going to get you there. So even if you've never heard of this before, if this is your first time being in this kind of field, that's okay. You're going to mess up. You're not going to get things, but we're here to help you through that. Our training program does a beautiful job of coaching them through how to understand these concepts and allowing me as the lead RBT to really build that relationship, establish our expectations, and instill in them that you've got this. You don't know this. You're learning this entire foreign language, and that's okay. I was in the same spot. But if I can do it, you can do it, and we're going to get through it together.
And I think what's so powerful and important is many of our leads and some of our non-leads are in graduate school. They want to become BCBAs. And so by allowing them to participate in the training, it really helps them gain some valuable experience that RBTs and clinics I've visited across the country often don't seem to get. So I think that's really, really great. Also, having an RBT training coordinator, Rachel, from your seat, how is having an RBT training coordinator impacted the quality and effectiveness of our training?
Well, I remember when the role was first announced, and Christina's the second person to hold this position, but when the role was first announced in 2021, and we were told it would be a graduate student, because I was still a case supervisor at that point, I was really excited. And, having somebody who is an RBT training and guiding our RBT training process, I think is so invaluable. I'm really passionate about the fact that I think we need, I know we all recognize the value of RBTs, but as much as we can, uplifting their voices and really getting their perspectives, because the day-to-day of being an RBT is rough. I was an RBT for 3 years, and, before I got my certification, it's rough. And I really like having an RBT in that role because it's easier for our trainees to relate to them, right? They're often in more similar life stages. They're not as intimidating. I find that sometimes people who are new to the field are afraid to go to their case supervisor at first. And, we emphasize the rapport building between case supervisors and RBTs, but when you're a trainee, that's really intimidating. This is your new boss and you're new to the field, so you don't have that context yet. And having that RBT training coordinator not only, provides some comfort to the trainee, but it's invaluable to our case supervisors. Obviously, our case supervisors are very busy. They have kids that they're trying to provide this really high quality service to. And so that coordinator really makes sure that all of our trainees are getting a standardized experience, regardless of what Apollo location they're in. And I think that leads to our higher clinical outcomes, as well as our really high pass rate.
Yeah, Christina, that's a really good point. So from your view, how does our training methodology shape the overall care and quality that our clients receive?
Sure. I think our overall training experience and everything really helps to increase the overall care and quality, because I do have a chance to build the rapport and make sure that I'm delegating every task that needs to be done. So I can kind of on the back end make sure that, if a trainee needs extra time, that maybe a lead doesn't have time. Because when I was an RBT, sometimes days are really hectic and they may not get to something. I'm there for, all the support that they need. So if maybe it's a rough day and they need a break, sure, absolutely. I can go in, kind of help guide them, be like, okay, let me go in and say maybe a trainee needs extra help on some DTT targets. I'm here for their support, make sure we get them up to speed. And I think really helping like in this role is like a key point because I'm kind of the leeway between the leads and BCBAs. And it really does, like Rachel said, help keep some of that extra stuff off of the BCBAs and make sure that I'm there for, leads and the new hires to make sure that they get support. And I think if you feel supported in a job, it leads to overall better care and quality because you feel if I feel supported, then I need to put in my best effort because if they're giving me my best effort, then I should give my best effort as well.
Yeah, that's really a great point. Just to kind of take a pause for a second and just share another aspect of Christina's job is I ask her to collect just a plethora of data on training outcomes. And we started this methodology back in January of 2022. And since then, we've had 66 technicians successfully go through the training. And we're averaging right now about 19.4 work days from day one of hire, which we don't even get to train them because they have HR onboarding, to actually taking the exam. And, as we all know that sometimes because of the number of RBTs out there, there's a lot of variance in hearing back from the BACB, but we're still trying to endeavor to keep that quality high, but see if we can't even trim a little bit more off how long it takes us, not just for financial reasons, but usually when you're bringing an RBT in, there's a client waiting to start. And the faster we can get that RBT up to our standard, the sooner that child will get access to therapy. But, kind of going back to Rachel, what you said about BCBA workload, and I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about the competency assessment. I think I might have been one of the more skeptical people when the BACB started allowing RBTs to participate in signing off on the competency assessment. But I've really learned to value it from the outstanding people that we've had participating in that. So kind of just talk overall about how Apollo's training method affects the workload of the BCBA. And I'd like that to springboard into some of the things that we've learned about the competency assessment and what we're doing to address those issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like I said before, we find that, we can keep our BCBAs from having to deal with these minute training issues with an RBT training coordinator, but also the way that our model is set up, right, when they're training with us before they take their RBT exam, we're not training them to specific kids, which I've seen in other places. I've worked in other companies, they're getting trained to the kid, but they're not getting trained to the concepts, which can make it much harder to pass that exam. And so we're training concepts. And so by the time that a trainee is passed off to their BCBA, we expect them to be able to, get through the day. They understand the basics. They can read a treatment plan. They can read program protocols. They can follow those things. But we also, the case supervisors then takes on in the development of their growing, right? It's not like training ends at you're passing your RBT exam. We all know that it takes time to develop those skills. But what we do is we give them a really solid foundation. So the BCBA isn't then having to go in and be like, wait, you don't know what reinforcement is. Wait, you don't know what an FR3 is, right? We want to take care of those issues so the BCBA can then really focus in on helping our new RBTs work with their clients. From a competency perspective, I agree with Dr. Moore that I know at my previous company, there was some concern when they said that assistant assessors could be RBTs, but actually I administered all the competency assessments when I was still an RBT at my last job, or most of them. And I found the experience very valuable and from a graduate student perspective, but I also found that consistency in the competency assessment is very important. And what we found at Apollo is in having RBT, somebody who's technically certified as an RBT, administer the competency assessments, we're a lot more standardized about the way we deliver the competency assessments because, right, it inevitably comes up right? Like when Christina got trained to do competencies, right? She wants to do a good job. She wants to make sure she assesses it. And so we actually here have a standardized set of ways that we assess each of those competencies on the RBT assessment. And Emily's also been trained in that. And so they're able to deliver the same quality of assessment because we've already worked through all those things in detail. What qualifies as passing for this? What doesn't qualify as passing? What Dr. Moore found earlier last year is when you actually go in and watch different BCBAs administer the competency assessment, we took a lot of IOA, and sometimes our one rater would pass them and one rater would fail them on the same thing. They observed the same thing. And so that level of variability is really concerning, right? But in our model, because our RBT training coordinators are like very specifically and mindfully trained on how to assess those skills, it's very equal across the board. You're not just passing because your BCBA happens to have a different standard, right? So I really actually like the use of the assistant assessors in our competency. And of course, I can always step in my role and like help with that and oversee that. But I've done a lot of watching our RBT training coordinators administer those competencies. And honestly, I would say their standard is high because they understand what it's like to be in the job and to need to understand these concepts.
Yeah, so to kind of elaborate a little bit even more, that, if you've ever given the competency assessment, it's very vague and subjective. It's basically yes, no. They did it or they didn't do it, without any really guidance or definition of what a minimum standard is. So we really defined what our Apollo standard is. And we continue to assess that with our own internal rating systems about the quality of the treatment they deliver once they exit training and then each month thereafter. But when I looked at the really total lack of any respectable IOA, when we looked at that for the competency assessment, we said, okay, we've got to do something different. And one of the great benefits, and I'll let Emily kind of elaborate on her experience as well, is by having a standardized criteria that allows us to easily not only cross-pod within a clinic where you go and you treat on another BCBA's team, but also go to other locations. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Emily, I believe I've seen you in all of our Apollo locations. We have a member of our Lawrenceville team treating here at Johns Creek today because they had a kid call out. We had a staff call out. And so it really allows us to continue access to high quality care for our kids without any bumps in the road or with minimal bumps in the road. Emily, kind of talk to us a little bit, not only about your experience moving from clinic to clinic and pod to pod, but just learning to do the competency assessment and the value you may have found in that.
Yeah, I think the thoroughness and intentionality with how we train and how we conduct the competency really just makes it approachable. I know that I've been trained on how to do this. I know that my RBTs that I'm renewing their competency or trainees that are getting their initial competency, they're trained. So this isn't some big, scary document we've never looked at before. I know what to expect. They know what to expect. And we are at that standard. We know how to get there, and it just makes it approachable. Going to another clinic, I know what to expect. I know the level of care that I'm going to be providing. I know the expectations that are on me. So there's no anxiety. I'm going to join another team today and I get to serve these great kids and provide high quality care. And that just intentional and authentic level of care to training is what makes Apollo so special.
Yeah. And just as a caveat too, if our BCBAs say, hey, I would really like to do maybe my, renewal competency assessments or all my new competency assessments, we really, they're able to do that. Rachel works for them to learn our standards, but most of our BCBAs really value that we are holding, raising the bar so high because it's just one less thing in their already busy day that they have to worry about. But I want to kind of talk, and just to continue with Emily for a second, talk a little bit about, and I know you don't have like another ABA experience to compare this to. But when you see trainees that might lack that confidence, how do you help them to gain that confidence? And then also talk a little bit about your impressions about the culture that we have here and the importance and the role of RBTs into our overall culture.
Yeah, I think you can easily tell when somebody's brand new to ABA and they're very intimidated by this foreign language they're learning and interacting with a child. It can be really intimidating. And so I think the very first day meeting this trainee, knowing it's intimidating, you're not going to understand, going ahead and establishing that I, as the trainer, recognize that and it's okay. And then noticing when they maybe aren't grasping concepts as fast or maybe aren't implementing things as quickly as we'd like them to be, telling them, hey, you look nervous. Are you okay? What's going on? Is there something you don't understand? Is this child just scaring you a little bit? Where are you at? How can I help you? We're here for you, you know?
And that's a lot less intimidating than hearing it from your BCBA supervisor.
Yeah, absolutely. And from day one, establishing like, I'm your friend, I'm here for you, I'm your teammate. Like, I'm not here to get you in trouble. If you do something wrong, I'm not going to go rat you out. I mean, of course, unless it's ethically unfair. But being there and knowing that I was in your shoes, this is intimidating and it's okay.
I'd like to just jump in here because I can't help myself. But one of the things I'm just curious, and this may be more of a general question here, but and I'd be happy to hear anyone's thoughts on this. But relative to the RBT repertoire, largely construed, are there specific skills within that repertoire that you guys see new trainees struggle with? Are there commonalities amongst the techniques, the concepts, the principles that people have a hard time getting their mind around? And if so, how have you coached and trained through that roadblock or through that obstacle?
So I think all of us could offer some perspective on this. I know that mine, and we might get some eye rolls here because I often sound like a broken record, is the biggest struggle that I see is building rapport with clients. And that's just not, someone who's introverted or maybe a little flat with their affect. It's even people who are really good with enthusiasm, not quickly recognizing when the client is not responding to that. Because we tell our staff, and I fully believe, we don't want our kids working for tablets or edibles or things like, or even tangibles any longer than necessary. We really want to build those strong relationships with our clients so that is what they're working for. And so one of the things I told our team on my very first day is that we're going to really focus on relationship building with our clients, and I will be relentless in my pursuit of being excellent at that. And so oftentimes that's a lot of the feedback that I give when I'm seeing a trainee or even as established RBT coming in. Rachel, what are kind of some of the maybe additional things that you've seen? And then we'll hear from Christina and Emily.
It's funny that you say that because that's pretty in line with what I was going to say, right? Like, obviously we see people struggle with DTT at first, right? Like that very structured way of teaching can be hard for people without background. But the thing that makes the difference here at Apollo is that adherence to our basic protocols, which include relationship building, right? That's the key, I think, behind what makes our clinical model so unique. And I know you've talked about it on previous podcasts, but I think that's the thing that our trainees struggle with the most. And that's why it's so important to us, to me and Christina in our department, making sure that our trainers are also really, really good at the relationship building and the adherence to our basic protocol. And that's kind of what we personally as a department are focusing on in the first quarter of this year, is making sure that our trainers are excellent models of this. And so that our trainees are also really looking at it. Because to Dr. Moore's point, like every kid is so different and unique in what kind of attention and what magnitude and what volume and all these little pieces, what is it that really does it for this kid? I mean, I'm transitioning my last 3 cases to our new BCBA in my original location. And between those 3 kids, the way that you build relationships with them is so distinct and unique. And so a big focus of our training is how can you teach our trainees to do that effectively? Because if they have just that piece, by the time they get to their BCBA and they pass the exam, you can teach DTT. You can teach, adherence protocols. You can teach reinforcement schedules. You can beef those skills up. But if you don't have that solid foundation of relationship building and the basic protocol here, like that's going to make your job a lot harder. And we do really emphasize that in our RBT training process. Dr. Moore had mentioned some like readings and things like that. All of our trainees read the Apollo playbook as part of their training. They have to understand what our basic protocol is, and they get to practice that over and over again in their training process.
Yeah. And, to my very, very hardcore radical behaviorists friends out there, I'm about to use a mentalism, so alert. I've really learned in 26 years that the foundation of effective, compassionate, trauma-informed ABA is trust for the client, trusting their RBTs trusting their colleagues, trusting their supervisors, trusting their executives, their clinical directors. When you don't have trust, nothing really seems to go right, and you tend to see negativity. You tend to see some of the things that really should not be inherent to ABA. I often say, at its best, ABA cannot help but be compassionate, trauma-informed, culturally sensitive. It just can't help it. And so the level of trust and the multi-layers of trust that you have to have cannot be understated at all. So Christina, that's kind of the same question. What are some of the things, because you interface with these trainees a lot and across all locations, what are some of the things maybe other than relationship building that you see trainees struggling with?
Of course, trainees are going to have like issues with some of the concepts and stuff, but I think sometimes it's those soft skills that trainees can kind of have difficulties with, that it's not necessarily spoken into the Apollo playbook or their 40 hours. So one of them is making sure we hire and teach our RBTs professionalism. I think that's one area that sometimes we might struggle with, but with Apollo and with our new method of training for the certified trainer process, we're really going to be focusing in on that professionalism that we want, because it goes hand in hand with trust. We need to have trust, but we also need to have a level and care of professionalism that we are in a healthcare setting, and these are clients that we deal with. And I think, our trainers and leads do an excellent job of, making sure that we're maintaining that professionalism standard, because we don't want our care and focus to be away from the clients. We don't want our trainees going in there and having personal conversations, because our ultimate goal here at Apollo is to make sure that all those clients are getting the best care that we want, because we want our clients to succeed. That's why we're here. We're here to make sure that we're giving excellent care and, helping these kids to push forward. I've seen some amazing, basically miracles happen here, where kids have gone from not speaking to being able, to have 3-4 word conversations. And it's like a blessing to work here. And I think, with our new method of training, helping in like that professionalism is really going to add on another layer to why Apollo is one of the best places to work for.
Could you give an example of what? Hang on, Jim. I'm sorry, but when people say professionalism, it means different things to different people, and I you don't have to go through a whole laundry list here, but and I think you alluded to one in terms of making sure your interactions in the presence of a learner are learner focused and not other focused, I suppose. But what are a couple of other key elements of professionalism that you guys feel are important, that you really try to hammer home with the folks who support your learners?
Sure. So like I said, mentioned one was we want to make sure that we're not having distractive conversations. So we can have personal conversations when we're not with the client. Another way of professionalism is following the Apollo dress code. So we want to make sure that we're dressed up to standards. And another one is a lot of times, sometimes when we're dealing with parents, we want to maintain professional with how we talk to parents too, because these parents are here for us to work with their kids and, help them increase their life quality. So, making sure that when we go outside, we're talking about, your client did this and they did amazing. So kind of helping to build rapport with parents too, and making sure we're not talking about, oh, I'm going to go see X and X movie on the weekends. I think that's a big one to make sure we're maintaining, those professional boundaries. If anyone else has any other ones, jump on in.
I just want to add the other thing that we really do emphasize in our RBT training is that client dignity piece. And I think we all know the basic examples of don't let your kid undress in front of other kids, or close the door to the bathroom. But these tiny little client dignity issues, how are we talking about the child in front of them? That's really hard for new RBTs, especially because, in a supervision model, right? We kind of have to talk about the kids, right? If I, in my case supervisor role and with an RBT, I've got to convey information. And for our new hires, that can be confusing, what's appropriate to say and what's not appropriate to say, right? And in my time as a case supervisor at Apollo, I've done a lot of work with RBTs on hey, here's how you can say that in a way that's still maintaining client dignity. Or we have an inter-office messaging system, send me a message. Don't say that out loud, please. Because our kids are all very capable of understanding. And I think sometimes that is hard for new hires who come in without knowledge of autism, right? There's definitely a cultural misconception of autism and the ability of autistic people. And so focusing on, hey, always assume the kid knows exactly what you're talking about. And how can we have these conversations to benefit the kid without, compromising their dignity?
Yeah, it's, this is someone's child, and many of them cannot effectively communicate what their day has been like to their parents. And so really getting back to that issue of trust, they're trusting us to care for their children just as well, if not better than they would. And so that dignity, seeing them as people first, is just so vitally important. And we really want to instill that from day one with not even our RBTs, all of our employees. With one of the things I often talk about, and to allude back to Rachel's point, is often you have to teach even BCBAs kind of how to talk over the room, is kind of what I refer to it as. It's hey, we're going to talk right now about our little friend here, so that we're more effective with him, but we also don't want to, make him feel any certain way about the fact that, we're, discussing this. And it's so important because sometimes we do have to communicate as a team if a child is in a dangerous situation or in just a difficult situation, like if there's an issue undressing in the bathroom. We have one little guy right now who is enjoying smearing his poop all over the bathroom. And so to keep yourself centered, present, and effectively understanding what your role is in those situations does take a little bit of extra training. I want to talk very quickly and to focus this to Christina, because I know Christina is just all over all of our locations. What has your impression been of the consistency, both of the clinical quality, but also the culture at our various locations? Because one of the things that is a goal of mine, and this is starting to show some fruition already, is parents. We live in Metro Atlanta. Parents, and I know my family, we're like, wow, we really don't like where we live right now. So we're making plans to relocate. And we had a client who was at Rachel's previous clinic who has now moved closer to one of our other locations. And they actually toured at that location on Friday and said, wow, this is exactly like her current location, just larger. It's just because it's a bigger physical space. And that made me feel really good, because I want parents to know when they see that Apollo brand, they know exactly what to expect and what kind of care their child will receive. So Christina, talk a little bit about what your observations have been.
Yeah, absolutely. I think our culture has moved to all three locations, which I think is just amazing because I can go to any location, and I can see the same exact things happen there. So if I go to Johns Creek, I know what to expect. If I go to East Cobb, I know what to expect. And if I'm at Lawrenceville, I know what to expect. And all of the kids at all of the locations are making excellent, progress. And I think that really goes hand in hand with, we really focus on that trust. We really focus on client rapport building. And I think, with the training department and really having, my position and, how we have a standardized method of training, we've really helped to keep that quality across all three locations. We've also done some IOA data that's also shown, our methods and our quality is almost about the same at all three locations. So I think that really is something that is super spectacular here at Apollo, that I can go and be like, okay, I'm going to go over to East Cobb today. And I know that this client's going to make progress, or I'm going to go and be like, our quality and everything is the same. I'm going to see the same exact text, care for the same exact clients, at every single location, which I think is just awesome to see since I get that chance to go to all three locations.
Do you guys have specific environmental cues that prompt staff members to adhere to these tenets, if you will? Because I'm hearing a lot of like trust and rapport as kind of values that are central to the organization. And I totally get how in a training context for new staff, you can imbue those values or at least share the importance of them. I'm wondering how you maintain that with people who've been there for a while and may be further away from that initial training period. Because it makes me think of like a school setting that may be running some sort of multi-tiered system of supports where they have, in our school, we value respect, responsibility, and safety, and those are the cultural values, or at least the behavioral principles that school is organized around. So it makes me wonder, I guess the larger question is, how is that consistency that I just heard you guys describe? How is that maintained across those three environments, particularly with staff members who are out of training for some period of time?
I can definitely speak to that. So I think part of it is that it's built into every level of the organization and not just the clinical levels, right? So Apollo, outside of our clinical model, also has core values. Our core values are positivity, action, team, integrity, and excellence. And the acronym that we use is PATTY. And so all of our techs are trained in that initially as part of their onboarding. And so we continue that we have what we call Katya cards in all of our locations. And so our techs and our BCBAs are encouraged to catch people following, adhering to those principles, to our core values, and to write them down a specific note, like what did you do that embodied that core value? And then those little slips go into a drawer, and like the different locations have different ways, but essentially you get drawings for like lunch or like a little gift, or it depends per location. But there's like this constant motivating factor of like, we're constantly trying to catch other people doing good, just like we're trying to catch our kids doing good, right? Like that's inherent to our clinical model. Why not apply that to our staff? We also have the bigger reward of every quarter 2 people win our core value vacay, which essentially they get a expenses paid vacation with PTO to go on a vacation. The executive team meets and gets nominations from every single clinic for people. Emily actually is about to go on her core value vacay. She just won that for adhering to our core values. And so there are these like constant reminders of like, oh, this is what we're adhering to. From the clinical side, Dr. Moore is a really big proponent of our clinical model. And so you're always going to be hearing about it. But I also think him taking the time with our case supervisors to get our case supervisors bought into the clinical model then trickles down, because our case supervisors are already bought into our clinical model and are constantly reminding our techs of the clinical model, right? Our BCBAs are very active and on the floor, like our BCBAs aren't in offices all day. Our BCBAs are with the techs. And so with that much oversight and support, it's inevitable that we're constantly going to be bringing it back to the clinical model.
I've seen reports of this on I think it's your Instagram and LinkedIn pages, and I've seen particularly the vacay piece. So that's pretty unique. So
Emily, where are you going to go?
Yeah, let's get to the important stuff.
Tomorrow morning, I fly out to New York City until Sunday. So tomorrow's Wednesday, so I'll go Wednesday to Sunday. Yeah. Woo.
Well, make sure you get with our new BCBA Billy so he can tell you all the great places to eat.
Yeah.
We just had a new BCBA join our team after listening to the Apollo case study series and moved from Long Island down here to Metro Atlanta to join our team. So that's really cool. But to also talk, one of the things that we've developed and we're about to roll out as part of our trainer certification as well are these kind of ratings of quality, where we kind of go through, like, here are the big points that we absolutely want to make sure we're not drifting on. And then the more specific points, like specific teaching methodologies, specific behavior reduction methodologies, our BCBA case supervisors manage those. So we kind of work together as a team to really kind of think that, hey, who might need some extra support? Maybe they've been here for a while, and it can, in any job at times, you can kind of start to lose that love and feeling at times, and might just need a little support or a little pick me up. But we really try to, to transition into a question for Emily, we really try to emphasize our core value of positivity is first for a very specific reason, because just like in a home, if the parents are at odds and there's tension, the children can kind of feel that. The same thing here. If we have negativity in any of our locations, it's going to impact the care that our kids receive. So, Emily, talk a little bit about the importance of positivity, and what are some of the cultural aspects here at Apollo that help set that positive tone?
Yeah, I think for me, it starts with our BCBAs. They set the tone from every day that what we do is hard work, and there are going to be days where it feels very negative just because of the experiences you've had today. But that we're all in this together, and you're still going to be celebrated for the things that you accomplished. So going back to our core values in the CACHA cards, those kinds of ideas that are established by executives can get lost in organizations that, okay, yeah, Patty, whatever, those are our core values. But here we live it. And our BCBA celebrates you when you accomplish those core values. And my team in particular, we every Friday, we read out every single CACHA card for the week. And usually there's like 30 or 40 for a team of RBTs. There's 10 of us. And we celebrate each other to maintain morale, to have that moment together where we are celebrating what we've done this week and things we've gotten through. So I think establishing time to celebrate together and acknowledge what we're doing just aids to that culture of positivity.
And it's so important, when you're talking to kind of two BCBA dinosaurs like Matt and myself, it's been a while since we've done a lot of that. While I still try to get in and do some direct care at times, not the 8 hours, 5 days a week that RBTs do. So when you hear things like burnout and stress levels, you can't compound how hard the job already inherently is with a toxic negative culture. So I often tell our team, hey, we've established a real positive culture here, and now it's everybody's job to defend it, and defend it through celebrating, through assuming that people are approaching their work with positive intent, rather than assuming that they don't care about their job or they don't want to do a good job. And so it's really, really so important. And so, Emily, as a follow-up to that, how can just a single RBT, not a lead, not a training certified trainer, hey, I'm just brand new, I've been here 2 months, how can a single RBT help change the culture of their work environment? Like, our listener might be listening to this and say, wow, this all resonates, and my situation is so terrible. Maybe it's not too far gone. Maybe it could be salvageable. How can a single RBT help change the work culture?
I think recognizing that it starts with you, that you can change your culture if you just share positivity, if you take the action to see that someone's struggling, be like, hey, how can I help you right now? You look like you need some help. being team oriented and doing things with integrity and excellence, just like our core values say. I think taking that upon yourself and recognizing, how can I do these things better? How can I hand out compliments to my team? How can I acknowledge that they're doing really hard work with a client right now and they're killing it? They need to know. Just me thinking it isn't enough. I need to share that with my team. So knowing that it starts with you, you can be the change, and seeing the positive impact that you can have on your team.
It's so awesome. To kind of shift gears a little bit, we've talked a little bit about this, but Christina, how do we have graduate students as employees that are not leads. We've talked about we're rolling out our certified trainer program, but currently, how do we incorporate graduate students into this training program to help them glean some experience from this?
Sure. So any current graduate student, they really get like some hands-on with training. And then also with like some of like the other certified, graduate students, they also get help from their BCBAs. So I know when I was a lead RBT, a lot of the technicians would still get, that experience from their BCBAs, which I think is super helpful to be like, okay, hey, I need help with this client. Let's walk through this process together and start doing some programming. You also get to run some assessments, which I think is really awesome here. I can say I've run the PCA at least over 10 times, which I don't think anybody else could say. I think that's just some awesome, great experience that you get. And then also our current graduate students, they also get those unrestricted hours by doing anything that their BCAs express towards them. And then with training too, we also have some cool opportunities coming up for our graduate students to help with the training process, using some modules, maybe taking some videos of them. As far as I've talked to all the graduate students, they're super, super excited for this opportunity to be in a video and kind of act a little crazy, but I wouldn't pass up on the opportunity either if I had the chance. So I think Apollo really kind of gives those graduate students a lot of the opportunities that some of the other companies may not, because we really do focus on, going back to the tell, show, and do. We really focus on the do part. So our graduate students really get a lot of opportunities to get all of those hands-on experience, and then going back to, we also have the BAT program for those graduate students who complete 80% of their hours. So they get, extra hands-on experience, kind of starting to run a case, working with this clients, kind of getting those extra hands-on experience that other companies may not necessarily give, which I think is super, super cool.
Yeah, and just for some context, BAT stands for Behavior Analyst in Training. And as Christina talked about, that's an opportunity for someone who has completed 80% of their fieldwork experience to be paired with a senior case supervisor and go through what is soon to be and in development, a very structured curriculum to help prepare them for day one as a BCBA, and hopefully that prepare them to be a BCBA at Apollo. And so just to kind of give that context. Okay, so I've loved really the discussion and the different directions it's taken. We talked a lot about Apollo's core values. We also at Apollo have other values that we ascribe to, and that's the values of science, or as Skinner called them, attitudes of science. And in the spirit of possibly my favorite one, and I can already see Rachel's reaction because she knows what's coming, philosophical doubt, which is kind of this constant questioning about the validity, the effectiveness of what you're doing. It's healthy skepticism. I'd like to hear from each of you at least one thing. And we've already talked about all the ways we're trying to improve training, but what's one thing, if you could say, hey, I want to improve this aspect of training, what would it be? Rachel, we'll let you go first.
Well, mine's pretty easy because it's one of my job duties, but I really want to improve our 40-hour training course. Right now, we're using a pre-made, like an already prepared course, and our intention, like Dr. Moore and Christina have mentioned, is to create our own 40-hour training course that is less confusing to our techs. We often get feedback that from our trainees, like, hey, they talked about this thing, and I'll be like, why did they talk about this thing to you? That's like BCBA level stuff. Or they'll be like, hey, they said this, but then the playbook said that. And I'll be like, yep, follow the playbook. And so one of my biggest goals for this year is to actually write and produce an Apollo 40-hour training course that'll include more of that shadowing, because we like we've all said, like that shadowing and that BST hands-on experience is what is making our techs great here and our trainees great here. And so I would say if there's something that we could change, that's it for me. That's the thing I'm always getting feedback on.
Right. And the 20-hour, the shadow training is a minimum of 20 hours per trainee. Mm-hmm. That can count towards a 40-hour curriculum. And we're currently not maximizing that. So our trainees are actually being exposed technically to 60 hours of approved 40-hour content. So we really are excited. One of the things I love that our CEO often says is that we're flying the airplane while we're building it. And so we have so many priorities, and it's like that's a big ticket one, that once we get our trainers certified trainer program off and rolling, that's going to probably be our next big thing. All right, Christina, one thing, go.
Cool. The one thing why I took the job and why I really want to improve is our overall trainer quality. So I want me to put a trainee with any trainer and they get the same outcome. Now we are pretty good at it, but not everyone is always up to that Apollo standard. And that's what I really want to do is I can put this trainee with any single trainer and I know that they're going to come out and be ready on that day one, to treat and survive the day.
Yeah, that's so important. And it was really, what we really realized was that we did have some variance, and that came from our trainee feedback. So I really appreciate our trainees being so open with us. But we also saw that our current approach was creating a bottleneck, which was we were bringing on more RBTs than trainers could really handle and still be effective. So I totally agree. I think the curriculum that you and Rachel have worked up and all the work you've done towards that certified training program is going to really help address that. So I really, really appreciate all your efforts on that. Okay, Emily, one or more things, go.
Oh, our training program's so great. I can't think of any. You guys have done such a great job refining it. And I feel very fortunate to get to work with all three of you. But I don't know. I guess just having people fall in love with ABA. I think if we could paint a picture that shows, hey, this kid started here and this is where we are now. Look at this growth. How could you not get so excited and be passionate about this field and the work that we get to do every day? I love coming to work. I've never had a job where I generally wake up in the morning and want to be here every day. We talked about I'm going on vacation tomorrow and I'm sad. I don't want to leave my coworkers. I don't want to leave our clients, because I have fallen in love with ABA through my training here at Apollo. So we can just continue to do that. I think we'll be set.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for appearing. I'm about to hand the reins back over to Matt to close us out, but this is so important. I hope our listeners have found some value. As always, you can find me on LinkedIn, or you can email me at jim.moore@apollobehavior.com. I've heard from so many of you, and one of the reasons that Matt and I talked about this particular episode was the numerous amount of feedback I got about RBT training. So I really appreciate feedback that we get from our listeners. So again, thank you all for coming on, and have a great rest of your day. Matt, I'll hand it back over to you.
All right. I really can't thank you guys enough for joining us today. Sometimes when Jim and I get on the phone and we chat, sometimes we sound like what are the two old guys in the balcony in the Muppets? That might be a dated reference in its own right.
The judges. I'm more of you. Get off my yard, you darn kids.
Yeah. And so this conversation was really a breath of fresh air. It's really cool to see how you guys are impacting change, developing a positive culture. There's so much out there in ABA social media about people really, really struggling, and we could spend a long time talking about that. I really liked how you guys really focused on specific actionable things that you can do to improve the quality of services that these learners receive by investing in staff. And it's also noteworthy that a lot of these activities are non-billable, so that represents a significant financial investment on the part of the company in developing you guys as practitioners, which in turn has a direct impact on learner outcomes. So many good takeaways. I think if I was a practice owner, I'd be taking notes furiously about how to copy what you guys are doing down there. So I can go on and on, but I'll just say thanks again for joining us for another Apollo case study series.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.